so if you're going to do this, you better get wide support, because otherwise your presidency is over.
All right, Ray, that's your theory on it. How do you think the congressional vote's going to play out in the upcoming vote? Which way is it going to go? And we've seen which way we think it's going to go. What do you think?
Well, you know, I'm not a domestic political analyst, so my opinion is an informed one, but not much better than anybody else's.
What's the public view then where you are? You know, what's the feeling around you?
Well, around here in Washington, within the Beltway and all the TV shows, you know, we got to do something. We got to protect the president. And all this. But the odd thing is that this time the Democrats have drunk the Kool-Aid, okay? This time we have to protect the president. He's gone out on a limb here, and they've drunk the Kool-Aid. And I talked to a congressman last night for 5 minutes, and it was very clear that he pledged the House leader, Nancy Pelosi, that he would vote according to what the president says, because we have to protect the president. And are you going to say that the president is lying? You don't have to say the president is lying. What you do need to say, according to our information, is that the president is being given cooked up intelligence because John Brennan, the head of the CIA, and...
Ωραία, κυρίες και κύριοι, θα περάσουμε σε αυτό το κομμάτι αργότερα πάλι, να συνεχίσουμε τι ακριβώς. Τελείωσε τώρα αυτό το κομμάτι που ήταν ο Mr. Raymond McGOVERN. Είναι η εκπομπή Ελεύθερη Γνώμη με τον Άγγελο Αγγελάτο. Θα συνεχθούμε τώρα μέσω του Skype μαζί του, να ακούσουμε τι έχουμε να μας πει. Στη γραμμή έχω και τον Γιώργο Γιαλτουριδη. Γιώργο, αν μπορέσεις θα σε κλείσω, θα με πάρεις σε λίγο για να σας συνέσω σε two ways. Να περάσουμε τώρα ένα λεπτό. Το τηλέφωνο του νομίζω να είναι ανοιχτό. Δεν μπορώ να τον πετύχω. Δεν έχει ανοίξει ακόμα το Skype. Η ώρα είναι 5 και 31 λεπτά. Είναι η εκπομπή Ελεύθερη Γνώμη. Έχουμε κάποιο τεχνικό πρόβλημα? Ναι. Δεν μπορούμε να το πετύχουμε. Να περάσω ένα διαφημιστικό μήνυμα και πάλι κοντά σας, αγαπητοί φίλοι, εδώ κοντά στην εκπομπή Ελεύθερη Γνώμη με τον Άγγελο Αγγελάτο. Ωραία, λοιπόν, επιστρέφουμε. We got Mr. Raymond McGOVERN online. Hello, Mr. Raymond.
Hi, how are you?
Very good. I don't see you. I can hear you. If you
want to see me?
Sure, why not? Because we are live on the television.
I thought it was just going to be
an audio. No, it's going to be a radio and television. Our networks go the both ways, both radio and television at the same time. But just turn on your camera. How are the things in Washington? Good? Oh, we have to reconnect it. We lost the connection somehow. Alright, we lost the connection. Alright, here we go. There you go. I can see you now very well. Yes, I can hear you, I can see you. If you can put your camera a little bit down, then there you go. Okay, how are you doing, sir?
Not bad. And yourself?
Very good, very good, very good. Nice. In Florida, you've been a lot of times in Florida, right?
Well, not as often as I'd like.
It's nice weather. It's around 80, 85, you know, it's summertime.
Don't rub it in here. It's been 100 degrees around here in Washington.
100 degrees. That's very interesting. I'll be waiting for George Yalturidis from Boston to join the club on the line. If you, George, listen to me, just call. George Yalturidis, just call on Skype. Then I can put him on the two ways.
Okay.
That way we can get him too. How are things in Washington?
Well, it's been like a roller coaster.
Really?
We were going to have a war, and then nobody showed up.
That was a joke. It's going to be a war, but nobody's going to show up.
Yeah, that's it was a little bit more complicated.
I know. Do you know? I was.
It looked like we were going to have a war against Syria.
Yes.
And I guess I have to do something here. Okay. And now it looks as though we've been thrown a lifeline from none other than President Putin from Russia, who has offered a way out that luckily our president decided he would exploit.
We got George in the other line. I don't know if you can see him.
Hello, Mr. McGovern. Hello, Mr. McGovern. How are you?
Good.
Very good. Now the both of you are online there, and we can join the people. They can see everything, on the television. All right.
Let me go, Angelo, please.
Yes, you're on the air. You're on the air. Yes.
Mr. McGovern, we already showed the RT interview from last Sunday, your appearance there. We gave us basically a small introduction as to your capacity. And right now, we just, we got about 30-45 minutes with you. We want to spend most of that time hearing you explain to us the Syria situation. We have a few specific questions regarding that, but one thing that caught our eye last week was the memorandum that you and your group had written to the President of the United States, your group titled Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. And basically that memorandum explained to the President that there is a lack of evidence regarding the chemical attack in Syria, at least evidence pointing towards the Bashar al-Assad regime. Could you please somehow give us a bit more detail on that, if you can?
Sure. And now I have to ask you if you can see me all right.
No, I don't see you somehow. I got the voice, no problem, but
my
maybe...
My Skype is not sophisticated enough to allow a three-way conversation.
Can be that.
So I'm going to have to just do the audio if that's all right with you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. We got your audio.
Sure.
Yes, I lost George Gialturides too, on both sides, and everything. But that's okay. We can work with the audio. No problem.
Well, the situation, as I jocularly described it earlier on, has really been like a roller coaster. 2 weeks ago, were we Thursday? Yeah, on Friday, the 30th of August, John Kerry got up at the State Department and flailed his arms and got red in the face and said, "We know." How many times did he say "we know"? 35 times, okay? He said, "We know that Bashar al-Assad ordered the use of chemical weapons. This is a terrible thing. We're going to have to zap them," okay? Now, that's a paraphrase, of course, but that was the whole 9 yards here. We have to do something because Assad did this terrible thing. Now, that was Friday afternoon. Friday afternoon also was released a assessment. Now, normally in these cases, you have an intelligence assessment released. This was not an intelligence assessment. For some reason, it was a, quote, government assessment. And what does that mean? That means that the White House had a chance to massage it, to add to it, to edit it, to make it appear more dangerous, the situation, than before. And so this thing, this 4-page document talked about the danger from chemical weapons and what Assad had supposed to have done. But, even there, I guess the intelligence professionals insisted that inserted into that memorandum was this, and I'll read. Our high confidence assessment, okay, that's what they called it. A high confidence assessment is the strongest position that the U.S. intelligence community can take short of confirmation. Well, hello? Short of confirmation? Well, that says then that we have, quote, high confidence, but no confirmation. Well, nobody's pointed this out in the press, but if it doesn't have confirmation, I don't care how many assessors you have or how many assessments you do, you need hard evidence. Now, one of the real flies in the ointment here is the fact that a lot of the administration's arguing has been based on an intercepted message, which the administration says shows that Assad knew about this chemical attack, planned it, was reported to about it, and so forth. While others say, no, that intercept indicates great surprise on the part of the Syrian military officers. They're saying, wow, do you know what just happened? Did somebody order this chemical attack? Well, we got to report this right back to Damascus right away, okay? So, where's the truth lie? I don't know. But I do know that it is within the president's power to release that intercepted message. You know, the people who say, oh, he couldn't possibly do that because we wouldn't want the Syrians to know that we're eavesdropping on their conversations. Well, hello. You know, I'm sure they would be shocked. They'd be just shocked out of their minds if they learned that the U.S. was eavesdropping on their communications, especially since they don't read the newspaper or see any TV, and so they don't know anything about all these disclosures about NSA snooping on everyone, including American citizens. So that argument really doesn't hold water. Now, what I'd like to explain here is something that nobody else really has explained, and it comes out of my experience working in the CIA. Back in 1986, when I was still on active duty, there was a terrible terrorist incident in Berlin. Somebody put a bomb in this discotheque where U.S. servicemen like to go, and it was full that night, and it blew up around 1 in the morning, and 2 U.S. servicemen were killed, many were injured, all told about 230 people injured. Now, we found out right away that it was the Libyans that did this. Now, how did we find that out? Intercepted communications. Now, when Ronald Reagan was told about all this, he got very angry. That was the 5th of April, 1986. Mm-hmm. He waited 10 days. On the 15th of April, he sent 60 warplanes to bomb the heck out of Tripoli, Gaddafi's palace, and Benghazi of recent memory. Now, what damage was done? A lot of damage. Who was killed? About 24 people, including Gaddafi's youngest daughter, 15 months old. His 3-year-old son was badly injured, survived. They missed Gaddafi, they didn't get him. But the whole world was aghast at this because they assumed that Ronald Reagan used this bombing in Berlin as a pretext to do in his favorite bête noire, okay, Gaddafi. And so Reagan came to us and he said, you know, a lot of people in the world don't like us killing little children, and I don't understand that, but they don't like it. There's a hue and cry in the world. We have to release that intercepted message so people will know that we didn't just make it up, okay? Now, we said, of course, we intelligence professionals, no, you can't do that. No, because the Libyans don't know that we're intercepting their messages, and they certainly don't know that we can decode them, so that we'd lose our source. And Ronald Reagan, to his credit, said, do it anyway. We did. In those days, the CIA followed whatever the president told it to do. They released the intercepted message. Ironically, it read like this. The incident happened at 1:30 in the morning. It was a success, and the best thing is nobody will ever know about it. So, nobody will ever know about it. It was a supreme irony because we had the message. So we released that message. The heat came off. The world at large knew that Ronald Reagan, number one, had a decent respect for the opinions of mankind, okay? And that he was willing to sacrifice this very sexy intelligence source for a larger cause, for matters of state. Now, why do I mention all that? Well, the situation is completely analogous to what Obama faces now. He's got a message, and his people contend that it shows that Assad was complicit and ordered this chemical event. Others say, not at all. We know that he has a record of refusing orders to use chemical weapons. The German intelligence service, the Bundesnachrichtendienst, the BND, has a surface vessel that patrols back and forth off the coast of Syria, and they have intercepted many messages, all of which indicated that when Syrian military officers asked for permission to use chemical weapons, Assad has said no. Now, did the Germans intercept this other message where Assad is said to have said yes? No, they didn't. Okay, so the suspicion is, and I share this suspicion, it's that they don't really have a smoking gun, because I can't for the life of me understand that if they have a message that says what the message says, what they say the message says, then there's no reason in God's earth why it shouldn't be released, the text of it, so doubters like me can be persuaded. The fact that they don't release it leaves me to suspect that it's more a case of it being inconclusive and maybe even damning to the American administration's case that Assad should be held personally responsible for this, because it may fall far short of that. So that's what the background is on the intelligence. It's terribly important in this instance, because either he did or he didn't, and the White House is advertising one story, and there are lots of places on the other. One last thing I'll say, and usually I can't talk about sophisticated classified things like intercepted communications, but so much has been in the public domain that I can this time. Suffice it to say this: the British, the British hung on to Cyprus for a long period of time.
We know that.
And you know that. Okay, now, when they left, they persuaded the Cypriots to let them keep this mountaintop, Why? Because they had these great big radars and other collection devices, and GCHQ, the General Communications Headquarters, which is the National Security Agency equivalent in the British system, they have this incredible capability to collect all manner of intercepted messages from that mountaintop. It's far better than anything else in that area. The U.S. depends on it as well as the British, and the Israelis depend on it. Now, the Israelis have less of a view in there because they lie a lot lower than this mountain, and they are not as sophisticated as the British. So, what am I saying here? Well, what this message is supposed to have said, it comes largely from, reportedly, an Israeli source. In other words, the Israelis intercepted this message, if it exists, okay? Now, the supreme irony is that this incredibly sophisticated monitoring device on the top of this mountain in Cyprus, which is much more able to collect these things than the rudimentary equipment in Israel, they missed it. They never got that message, And so you have the Israelis didn't get it. You have the Germans didn't get it. I mean, not the Israelis, but the British didn't get it in Cyprus. The Germans didn't get it right off the Syrian coast. You don't have to be paranoid to think, maybe there's something more than meets the eye here. What the president needs to do is release that intercepted message, and then we'll know what's up and what he has and what he doesn't have.
What do you think, Mr. Raymond? This message is coming from Israel? You experienced you got as a past CIA for a long time.
If it's real.
Well, if it's real at all, I doubt whether it's real, but anything that is supplied to us by the Israelis should be looked on with additional scrutiny, because Israel is not a disinterested party here. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, when people ask me, well, why why does John Kerry want war? Why do so many people want to strike against Syria? Don't they realize that this will just keep the struggle going on forever and ever? And I say, yeah, they do realize that. And there's only one country that profits from this.
Israel.
Israel, yeah, because as long as you have the Sunni and Shia going at each other's throats in Syria and in the whole area now.
Egypt, Syria, Iran, Iraq, all of those places.
Right, and so as long as they're trying to kill each other, then they don't have time to turn their swords or their
against Israel
launches against Israel. So, and the Israelis say this. The New York Times correspondent in Jerusalem had a really interesting article in the Times on August 30th. She said, I talked to a lot of Israeli officials, some senior ones, and I asked them, what's the preferred outcome of the struggle in Syria? And they said, our preferred outcome is no outcome. And she said, what? She says, yeah, as long as these two enemies are engaged in fighting each other, we have no incentive to stop it. Let them kill each other off, for Pete's sake. That's what they told us. And wonder of wonders, it got into the New York Times. But that's the name of the game. The Israelis have no incentive to make peace in Syria. And, there's also the matter of Iran. Now, the Israelis are trying desperately to get Iran. Now, Iran has a mutual defense treaty with Syria. Most people don't know that. And so if the U.S. starts bombing Syria, if that contributes to the weakening of Iran's ally in the area, well, Iran's got to be embarrassed by that because there's very little they can do about it. So, number one, keep the pot boiling. Number two, weaken Iran's only ally in the area. And number three, try to provoke Iran. Now, try to provoke Iran into doing something on this, if only to save face. And once Iran does something really stupid, in my view, then we can have at it. We can sort of just bomb the heck out of Iran as well. People like to bomb the heck out of a lot of countries. And John Kerry, curiously enough, is, Mr. Bomber-in-Chief. And luckily, he was mousetrapped by the Russians, and they told him, we're not going to deal with you on this business about UN supervision of chemicals in Syria. And so on Monday morning, famously in London, after he was delivering his prepared remarks, a journalist came up and said, now, Secretary of State Kerry, is there anything at all that could be done, that Syria could do to avoid being attacked? And Kerry looked at me and said, well, yeah, there is. They can give up their chemical weapons. They can submit them to UN inspection and have them destroyed, but they're not going to do that. That's out of the question. That's not going to happen. Now, that's about 10 o'clock London time. An hour later, the State Department spokesperson, woman, says, well, now, Secretary Kerry is just making rhetoric. That's really just, he raised that for rhetorical purposes, okay? 2 hours later, his counterpart in Russia, Foreign Minister Lavrov, gets up before the cameras and says, we propose that Syria destroy its chemical weapons. We think Syria will agree to this, and we await their response. And an hour later, Foreign Minister of Syria says, good idea, we can do that. And all of a sudden, Kerry is undermined and made a fool of, and Obama is allowed to say, well, yes, I discussed this with Putin when I was in St. Petersburg just a week ago, and I'm glad that the Russians are giving this chance to make peace rather than war. I will not require a vote in the Congress, and we'll see. We'll run this to ground, he said. We'll see if we can make sure that the Russians and the Syrians are serious. So from August 30th, where it looked like war was certain, until just when the president spoke on, what was it, Tuesday, 2 days ago, we had a whole convolution. We had a whole turning over from war to peace. And the interesting thing is that a lot of people are very angry. They wanted this war.
They won the war.
Yeah, well, look at this. One of the most powerful people in Congress, his name is Carl Levin. He's chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. And he came out with a devastating statement here, criticizing citizens for opposing the war. And he wants a vote. Even after the president spoke, Levin wants a vote. And he wants the people to say, yeah, we're for a war, and we'll do a war if you don't, do what we require. So, well, what about Levin? Well, he's one of these neoconservatives. Well, people can't understand this, and it's hard for me to understand, but these are people who legitimately think that the strategic interests of Israel, on the one hand, are synonymous with the strategic interests of the United States. Now, I don't fault them for believing them. People can believe what they want. But I do fault them if they pursue a policy that is mostly in favor of Israeli demands or Israeli interests, and not so much in favor of our interests. That's Syria to a fare thee well. That's Syria exactly, because we have no business in Syria, and the Israelis, of course, occupied and actually annexed parts of Syrian territory in 1967. They would very much like Syria to be given a bloody nose, and how better to do that than to enlist the United States to make sure that Assad doesn't win, and that the really bad guys, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, that they don't win either. And once you get the U.S. involved, you're guaranteed that the U.S. will make sure that the outcome in Syria is something that benefits Israel's interests because of the people running our policy. If you look at Secretary Kerry, okay, now he spent as much time out of Washington as he has in Washington for the last 2 or 3 months. Now, he said that he was trying to pursue a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. He wanted to get talks started again. Well, he was a miserable failure. The Israelis are making still more settlements in occupied territory in the West Bank and elsewhere. And Kerry is criticizing the Europeans for criticizing the Israelis. So what was Kerry really doing out there? Well, he spent a lot of time with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. I think the evidence is pretty clear that they were talking about Syria, not so much about peace in Palestine.
Well, you are a past CIA person. You should know more what we know. Let me ask you something, Mr. Raymond. If the president of Syria, they don't put these gas tanks, whatever, to kill his own people, who has done it? Al-Qaeda?
Well,
the rumors they go around in Europe, because our television stations broadcasting in Greece and all over in the world, and Europe too. And I hear people, they said, Turkeys, they have to do something to Israel. Turkey, I don't know. Do you hear anything about it?
There are reports that Turkey and Saudi Arabia and the Qataris met on this in mid-August, and there are reports that Prince Bandar from Saudi Arabia facilitated the introduction of the chemical elements there into the suburbs of Damascus. I don't know if these reports are right or not, but at least they're rather detailed, and they're more detailed and more specific than anything that the U.S. administration has allowed to be discussed. The U.S. administration says, for example, sarin, the nerve gas, very difficult to produce. Rebels could never have sarin. Wrong. Don't you remember the sarin attack in the Tokyo subway, 15, 20 years ago? Was that some sort of sophisticated Syrian attack? No. It was a rebel group. It was a terrorist group. Anyone can mix the necessary elements to make sarin. So when you see people arguing things that are demonstrably untrue, you're forgiven for suspecting that the rest of what they're saying is not true either. And what my point is, I just don't know. I just don't know who was responsible for those chemical incidents there outside of Damascus. But the evidence needs to be put on the table. And if the White House has evidence implicating the highest reaches of the Syrian government, it owes the world that evidence. It needs to publish it, just as Ronald Reagan did with respect to the Libyan example that I had used before. They need to do that. And if they don't do that, leads me to suspect that they don't have the evidence. And this is something cooked up with Prince Bandar and other people who just want to keep the war going.
Mr. McGovern.
Yo.
Your key bono analysis regarding Israel benefiting from this ongoing civil war definitely makes sense. There was one more regional leader who really wanted to go after Bashar al-Assad and still does, Turkey's Erdogan. After Monday's agreement between the Russians, the Americans, the Syrians, that they're going to put the stockpile of chemical weapons, Syria's chemical weapons, under UN control and eventually destroy them. That agreement has to hit hard Erdogan's plans regarding Syria. I see Turkey's leaders scrambling right now, Erdogan, Davutoglu, and the others. What are your feelings about that? So what do you think Turkey's next move will be regarding this Syrian conflict? Ever since Kerry's comments in London on Monday morning and Russians jump to the opportunity, Turkey has not been heard of since.
Yeah, they're as disappointed as the neocons around here. They wanted this war, or at least they wanted the U.S. to be involved more directly. So Erdogan, he's got lots of problems here. There's no gainsaying the fact that he has a terrific challenge in accepting all these refugees. So that's one immediate problem. But his main concern, I think, are the Kurds. Now, once you allow the Kurds to get some measure of autonomy, as they have in Iraq, and as they're in danger of getting in Syria, that's a big problem from Erdogan. It's a big problem for the Turks. So the situation is very fluid. And a little bit like the Israelis, the Turks really wanted the U.S. to be in bigger, to be in not only with their clandestine forces and the CIA and all. What they wanted was to have the U.S. bombing and U.S. engaged militarily against the Assad regime. One of the ironies here, of course, is that Secretary Kerry got up and said, well, the problem is that the rebel forces are really doing a good job, and they're got the momentum. When he said that, everybody scratched their head, because what Senator McCain and Senator Graham were saying is, no, we need this legislation to say precisely, the legislation that was approved by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, we need this legislation to say that not only will we bomb Syria, but we want to change the momentum of the struggle on the ground. Now, I ask you to think about that. If Kerry is right and Assad is losing, why would Senator McCain and Senator Graham want to change the momentum? Well, it's clear that Kerry either was out of it or was lying. He didn't know what's going on here. The government is winning, all right? Over the last 3 months, the government has made many advances, and that in itself is a large part of the explanation as to whether as to something dramatic needed to happen. And what better than to have a chemical attack that explicitly violates the red line that our president unwisely set a year ago and triggers a reaction from the U.S. and because of what the president said. That's, that would have been golden. Now, it didn't happen. And I think this is one of those few times where you can sit back, take a deep breath and say, wow, the Russians and the Syrians, in accepting this proposal, have given peace a chance here. Now we need to be out in the streets and in the congressmen's offices, making sure that they don't screw this up, making sure that, yes, they trust and verify this agreement, but not letting them go back to this warlike stance saying, we have to give Assad a bloody nose because he did this, that, and the other thing.
Yes.
Regarding Russia, what Vladimir Putin wrote in yesterday's op-ed in the New York Times parallels what you just said, sir. And I quote, "No one doubts that poison gas was used in Syria, but there is every reason to believe it was used not by the Syrian army, but by opposition forces to provoke intervention by their powerful foreign patrons," which basically repeats what you just said, sir. But one thing I wanted to go back on Turkey, if you don't mind. Sure. Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, she strongly embraced Turkish Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu's strategic depth doctrine, basically calling for Turkey to become a regional power in the Sunni Muslim Middle East. And basically that foreign policy followed by Hillary Clinton gave some sort of support for the Sunnis, of course, against their eternal religious enemies, the Shias. You explained yourself how the Alawis in Syria are connected to the Shias. Of course, the Iranian the Shias. There are some Shias, the Shia minority in Iraq. However, this sort of thing backfired. We saw in Egypt how this support for the Sunnis backfired. Support for the Brotherhood, but it also means support for Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra. And we saw what happened in Egypt. We even saw what happened at the embassy in Libya. What are your thoughts about embracing this Sunni Muslim religious group with Turkey at the helm, sir? We believe, when we analyzed it a lot on this station, that it is something the United States foreign policy is embracing, but they're making a big mistake on that.
Well, I'll say something that you will never hear in the mainstream media of this country, the United States. Israel is the main factor here. Israel wants to zap Iran. Israel argues that Iran is building a nuclear weapon. U.S. intelligence agencies, all 16 of them, concluded in 2007 that Iran stopped working on a nuclear weapon in the fall of 2003. That's 10 years.
Really?
That's 10 years ago. Yeah, when you say really, most people would say that because it's never in the New York Times, it's never in the Washington Post, but that's what happened.
You mean the American media, and they don't inform the American people?
Well, once a year, just to protect themselves, they put it at the bottom of page A18 in the Times and the same in the Post.
Yes.
So what people need
headlines.
to know is that the notion that Iran is hell-bent on creating a nuclear weapon is a lie. It's a strange way to go about creating a nuclear weapon if you canceled the program back in the fall of 2003. Now, in 2007, when honest intelligence analysts came up with that conclusion, and it was unanimous, all 16 intelligence agencies, this upset George Bush and Dick Cheney very much, because they had intended to start a war against Iran together with Israel in 2008, which was their last year in office. Now, you don't have to take my word for that. I don't suggest that you buy Bush's memoirs. It's called Decision Points. But if you have access to a library, Go to the library and read what Bush himself wrote about this. At the end of 2007, Bush and Cheney had both been saying, Iran is going to get a nuclear weapon. We have to stop them. And when a journalist asked George Bush in October of 2007, well, are you sure they want a nuclear weapon? He says, what do you want? What do you want? World War III? Is that what you're after? World War III? Okay. 2 weeks later, 2 weeks later, the intelligence community pronounced that Iran had stopped working on a nuclear weapon in the fall of 2003 and had not resumed work. Every year since then, so we're talking 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. Early this year, the head of national intelligence revalidated that judgment, saying, we have no evidence that Iran is working on a nuclear weapon. Now, what you see in our body politic and what you see in our Zionist-dominated media is quite a different story. You have pretty faces like David Gregory on NBC last Sunday. Did you notice when he asked that fellow Dennis McDonough, he said, well, how about, Iran working on this nuclear weapon? Well, is that part of the blah, blah, blah? And so they always insinuate it, but it's not true. Okay, so what am I saying here? I'm saying that the Israelis really have a great incentive to blacken the Iranians, and the Iranians are Shia, okay? Now, the friend of my, or the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And the Sunni hate the Shia, Turkey, Egypt. There are a lot of Sunnis around, okay? It used to be the Sunnis in control of Iraq, now it's the Shia. So I don't understand exactly why they hate each other so much, but they do, okay? And so Israel would certainly want to have its policymakers and U.S. policymakers who favor Israel enlist the Sunnis in this broader context to put the Shia in their place, to the Alawites that, of course, Assad is part of, are a branch of the Shia religion. And so even though there's a majority Sunni population in Syria, they've been able to keep a reasonable peace there, together with a sizable Christian population, until recently, when all this strife took place, and now they're trying to keep it going and hoping that maybe Iran will try to come to the defense of its ally, Syria, and if they did that, of course, they'd be zapped. That's why I think the Iranians are far too smart to get involved in that kind of thing.
Mr. McGovern, I want to ask you one question. Lately, for the past 3-4 years now, we see a lot of American journalists, very good name, like Larry King. They don't work with the American media, like ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, CNN2, blah, blah, blah. But they go to Al Jazeera News and RT News. You pass the CIA. Why that happen? I mean, a lot of people, they ask me that. Why? Because we broadcast in 2 hours a day RT News in our television station. We have Canadian news, we have Russian news, we have blah, blah, we have Greek, Italian, wherever. But they ask me, people they see, Larry King, he used to be on CNN. What the hell he's doing on Russian news? And only that, but there are a lot of Americans, very strong journalists. Yeah. They left the American medium and they went to the foreign medium. Why? Sure.
Well, that's a really, really good question. And most people don't remember, but Hillary Clinton, when she was still Secretary of State, said this. She said, when I travel, I tune into Al Jazeera and RT because they're far more useful, far more informative than the channel and the broadcast, the media there in the U.S. The Secretary of State said that, okay? Now, what's the deal here? Well, the deal here is that the mainstream media are heavily influenced by the corporations that own them. And who are these corporations? Corporations like General Electric. And what do? They profiteer on wars. very simple. Motorola, Disney, they're all major sections of these owners of the corporate media, international corporations, are profiteering on wars. Now, you notice I didn't say profiting, I mean profiteering. When you look at all the money that they've gotten out of Iraq and Afghanistan and even Libya, I mean, you know, it's really quite amazing. So you have a media that is controlled by the very people who have an incentive to do wars, to sell more equipment. The military, industrial, congressional, media, national security apparatus. In other words, it's no longer what Eisenhower described, the military-industrial complex. It's all of these things are wound up in what is controlled by the money that comes out of these profiteering things. And where does that money go? Well, it comes back to the Congress people who approve these things and the people who vote for them. Just a little side thing here. I noticed, perhaps I mentioned already, that Senator Levin has really regretted that there's not going to be a war. He said the American people really have to change their tune. They have to realize sometimes we have to threaten, okay? Now, I ask you, do you know which congressperson or senator in our Congress now has received more money from the Israel lobby than any other congressman or senator?
Carl Levin.
His name is Carl Levin. Now, I don't criticize the fact that he has his own opinions, but, you know, if he feels this strongly about Israel, I doubt whether he should be able to be chair of the most important armed services committee in the world. His interests are very, very varied, and they're not exclusively tuned to the U.S. interests. You know, our first president, George Washington, who was also a general, of course, he warned very specifically in his farewell address against what he called entangling alliances, or he also called passionate attachments from one country to another on the false premise that the interests of both countries are synonymous. Now, he was talking about France, okay? France did us a great big favor. They helped us win the revolution. And so there were a lot of people in this country thinking, yeah, we got to help France. They're fighting those same British. We got to help France. And Washington said, no, that's not in our interest. We're not, you know, we won the war. Let France do his own fighting. And so that's what he was after. And the prescience, you know, the foresightedness of our founders was remarkable. And as I already mentioned, the fact that they put into the very first article of our Constitution the fact that no king, no president, no executive would be empowered to start a war, only the representatives of people in the Congress. And that's what needs to happen now. And in a sense, it's really good that Obama went back to that Constitution, specifically said that I'm going to abide by those constitutional premises. And, you know, 2 weeks after it looked like we'd have a terrible war starting, it's time to rejoice, frankly. Very, very rarely do we have a chance to sit back and say, well, the people won this one. And what I want to just suggest to your listeners and your viewers, the people really and truly did win this one. And so we have to keep the pressure on to make sure that things are not reversed by the moneyed interests of people who put Israel's interests first.
Yes. Well, my guess was right 3 weeks ago where I said, I don't think Obama is going to have a war down there in Syria. And I was so possible about it. Well, Mr.
We have a little bit of time left, Angelo. Mr. McGovern, would you mind taking a few phone calls if we have any viewers calling? If you want to take 2 minutes with us.
I'd be happy to.
All right. Anybody want to talk to Mr. Raymond McGovern, please call 727-725-5555. Let's go to the first line. Yes. Hello. This line is dropped. Next line. Yes. Hello. We already have lost those lines. We have a lot of lines waiting for a long time. 727-725-5555 is our telephone calls, our telephone lines. You can call in talk direct to Mr. Raymond McGOVERN. It's alive.
Mr. McGOVERN.
Yes.
Well, we are waiting for the people to call. I just want to add something to that George Washington statement that you made. That is very true. However, when Napoleon was fighting Wellington and he was short on cash, we did give him 4 cents an acre.
Yeah, well, you know, you don't have to be hidebound behind these things. Sometimes you can make exceptions and be a little bit flexible.
Well, okay,
Well, let's go.
We tripled the size of the country.
Hello?
Oh, yes. Yes. Μάλιστα.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Yeah, I got a question. If the war was to happen, do you think Russia would get involved militarily? Because they were saying that they were not going to get involved, but then all of a sudden you got all these ships going down to the Mediterranean over there, and troops and all kinds of things going on. So it looks like they were preparing for something big. So my question is, would you think if something happened in Syria that, you know, the Russians would either way would get involved militarily?
Well, that's a very good question. Am I on the air now?
Yes, you're on the air, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I used to know more about Russian history than I knew about American history. My graduate degree is in Russian studies. And, you know, it's only been since the mid-18th century that Russia extended its wrist, that is, Moscow has extended its wrist down to the Black Sea and to its south, its southern underbelly. Now, that was Catherine the Great. And ever since that time, Russians have looked at that as a very vulnerable, soft underbelly. Now, Iraq, that wasn't so important. Syria, au contraire. Syria is very important to the Russians, not only because it, you know, has a naval base that they let the Russians use, but because the Russians are heavily invested in there, in the weaponry that they give the Syrians, that they sell to them, and the support that they've traditionally given Syria over the years. It is their influence in Syria that persuaded Assad to go to this unheard of opportunity to destroy his chemical weapons. So the Russians are really more interested in what happens there than they were in Iraq and certainly in Libya. Would they want to get into a fighting match with the U.S.? Under no circumstances. This doesn't prevent them from sending a bunch of submarines and surface vessels to that part of the Mediterranean to show the flag, but the worst thing in Moscow's point of view would be a fighting war with American warships in that part of the world. And so there's even more incentive for the Russians to prevent themselves from seeming to be very weak sisters here, very weak partners with Syria, and there's a great deal of incentive to bend their ally in Syria to come to a solution to this thing that would not tempt the Americans to become militarily involved, and at the same time appear, as Putin has been able to present himself now, as a peace-offering country, a country that says, hey, you know, you really ought to try diplomacy before you go to this automatic reflex action of war. So the Russians consider Syria very important. They are very concerned about what happens to their south underbelly, their near frontier, as they call it. And that's why they're so heavily engaged, and that's why they went out on a limb and got Bashar al-Assad to agree to this new proposal.
And one more question. In case something happens with Israel, let's say Israel attacks Iran, do you think, I mean, from what I can see, and I've studied Iran or whatever, it doesn't appear, it appears to be a strong militarily country. Would you think such an attack would be able to, like Iran, would be able to survive such an attack?
Iran would. I'm not sure about Israel. This question came up last year at this time, before the presidential election. It looked very much as though Israel wanted to start a war with Iran, thinking that were they to do so, Obama, right before the election, would have no option other than to join, to jump in, to make sure that he got the Jewish vote. Now, that looked very probable. We were very concerned about that. July, August of last year, there was a lot of rhetoric, and it looked like maybe Netanyahu was going to follow through with that rhetoric. What did Obama do? Well, he sent Panetta, his defense secretary, and he sent his national security advisor, and he sent Hillary Clinton, and they all went, and they said, please, Bibi Netanyahu, please don't do that. It would really mess up our election process. Please don't do that. Of course, worried that if you did do that, precisely that would happen. The president would have to jump in defense of Israel, and all hell would break loose. So what happens? Well, the president, we kept saying, you can make this clear, Mr. President. You can just speak out and say, under no circumstances, if Israel provokes a war with Iran, under no circumstances will we automatically jump to the defense of Israel. You can do that, Mr. President. And guess what Obama said? He said, no, I can't, because the Israeli influence, the Israel lobby is too powerful in this country. Now, to their credit, the military, our senior military, General Dempsey was already head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They saw the problem, and they didn't want any part of getting involved in a war with Iran. And so what happened? On the 30th of August last year, General Morton Dempsey, at a public forum in London, said this, and I quote, I wouldn't want to be complicit if the Israelis attacked Iran, period, end quote. Whoa. Now, the president couldn't say it, but the next best thing I'd suggest to you is that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said it, and that was it. Netanyahu was warned publicly, and that's key, publicly, and the pressure went down. The election took place, and Netanyahu still wants to do it, but our military is standing pretty firm, saying, look, if you think Iraq was a debacle, try it with Iran, which is not on its back with no weapons, but rather is a very powerful regional military state, and also has all manner of retaliative possibilities, and just won't give up easy. So, and it's got 2.5 times the population of Iraq. It's a strong country, and that's precisely why Israel would like to have the United States do to Iran what we did to Iraq, namely destroy that country and its infrastructure.
Yeah, because I watch videos and stuff, and I see that Iran has a good military, and not just sea, and it's got good military, good air force. They have weapons, and they make their own weapons.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So it's not like they depend on Russia or anybody else. They make their own weapons, and they're very well trained soldiers.
Now they're not a match for the United States, but how many wars does the United States want to get involved in? I think maybe Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya. I mean, probably that's enough, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Right, thank you.
Next line.
Take care now.
Next line.
Hello.
Yes.
I'd like to ask a question on German intelligence. It's been reported by the Deutsche World, and it got all the way around the world, including here in Seattle, that the Germans have a whole file of Assad warning his commanders and his troops not to use weapons, not to move weapons, not to do anything in regards to attacking the other side with the use of weapons. They have this whole set of intercepted communications. They let it out through their newspapers. Why is it that the Obama hasn't, and people in Congress haven't picked up on this and brought this up straight to the president's face and said, listen, the Germans are saying this, the British are saying this, what's wrong with you? Are you off your rocker or something? To me, it's unbelievable that we've reached this point that we're blaming Assad for the attack.
Well,
when the Germans are going the other way. Totally.
You make a very good point. The problem is, when you've been here for a while, I've been in Washington now for 50 years, having left New York City when I was 22. If you've been around for a while, you see the palpable power of the Israel lobby. You see that the president considers himself to be hamstrung in what he can do in terms of the power that he has because of the extreme strength of the Israel lobby, particularly in the Congress. They have the power to remove representatives and senators, which they've done. They have the power to spread around a whole lot of money, which they continue to do. And it takes a very strong president, far stronger than Obama, to face into that. So yes, the Germans and many others are saying, you know, you don't really want to get involved in another war there, do you? But on the other hand, Carl Levin, the head of the Senate Armed Services Committee, many other people in Congress, and of course Netanyahu and the Israelis there that were running that hardline government, they would just as soon see the United States get involved in Syria in a military way. And who has more influence? Well, unfortunately, it's the latter. So it makes good sense to think as you did with your question, but the realities are that Obama has traditionally deferred to the Israel lobby and to Netanyahu. Witness the most recent charade where John Kerry was going to work on getting negotiations started again between Netanyahu and the Palestinians. Look what became of that. The Israelis immediately built new settlements, promised to finance still more settlements in occupied territory. And John Kerry, he said, well, this is not a good, not the wise move, but he doesn't denounce it. And as a matter of fact, he goes to the people in Europe who are upset by that, and he says, no, don't criticize them. Don't criticize the Israelis, and still less, please don't put sanctions on them. So Kerry is one of the neocons, one of those folks that see Israel's interests as synonymous with our own, and that spells trouble, because everybody sees that. All the Arabs, the Turks, everyone in that whole region sees that the U.S. is so closely identified with Israel that when Israel does its very restrictive and oppressive policies in the West Bank, in Gaza, in the parts of Syria that are now annexed to Israel, well, they see that the U.S. not only doesn't criticize it, but finances it out of our tax dollars to the tune of $3 billion a year. That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. Mr. McGovern, let me ask you something on the Israel situation. I was talking the other day, some guy from Salonika, I hear from many Jewish people in our talk show, because, our radio station and television just bite everybody here. And, a lot of times those people have disagreed with them, with the Israelites. They call themselves a USA, and they said we are a state of the United States, and nobody can touch us. And I said, no, you are not a part of USA. Israel, Greece, Turkey, Germany, England, they are not a United States of America.
Yeah.
I said, maybe you're a French alliance, but you are not. You don't have the American flag under the Israel, And but why those people, they want the Israelites, they go down to the Middle East, they said, we are Americans. We are a state of the United States of America.
Well,
I can understand.
Again, it harkens back to the influence that the hardline Jewish Lichudniks have in our Congress and in our body politic. It's really quite amazing. After the time when the Arabs did attack Israel, I'm talking 1973, they succeeded for a day or two, and then, of course, they were demolished. But after that, Henry Kissinger and others went to the Israelis and said, we don't want this to happen again. here's an idea. Let's do a mutual defense treaty. That way, if you're pledged to defend us and we're pledged to defend you if someone else attacks you, the Arabs are going to think twice before attacking you again. So let's have a mutual defense treaty. And what did the Israelis say? Oh, that's really sweet of you to suggest that, but thanks, but no thanks. Now, what country in the world would refuse a mutual defense treaty with the sole remaining superpower in the world? Well, the only country that would and did is Israel. Now, why did they turn that down? Two reasons. One is this, that an internationally recognized mutual defense treaty requires internationally recognized boundaries. And the Israelis didn't want to raise the question of boundaries since they had annexed, they had occupied parts of Syria, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, and Gaza. They didn't want to raise that thing. So, if you need to talk about frontiers, no, they didn't want to. It's the second thing, when you have a mutual defense treaty with another country, usually written right into the treaty is that you undertake an obligation to inform the other country when you're in danger, or specifically if you want to attack a third country. The Israelis didn't want any part of that. It's much easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. And if they want to strike out at Syria or Lebanon or Jordan, as they traditionally do, they don't have to come to the Americans and say, oh, by the way, next week we're going to bomb Syria again. No. It's much easier just to avoid that. So those are two really good reasons, in their view, why they didn't need a treaty, because the U.S. populace had already been sort of cajoled into being knee-jerk supporters of Israel. That's what happened. So what I'm saying here is that when people say Israel is our ally, that's wrong. Look it up. Look it up in your dictionary. What's the definition of an ally? The definition says an ally is a country with whom your country has a mutual defense treaty. There ain't none with Israel. And it's the Israelis that turned it down. Really? Now, some people make a joke out of this. There's a fellow that says, well, I understand that someone broached to Netanyahu that they make Israel the 51st state in the United States of America. He turned it down because he said, well, if that happened, then we'd only have 2 senators. That's a joke.
Mm-hmm. You're right. You have only 2. Now they got more on the packet.
They got many more than 2.
Okay, let's go to the next line. Παρακαλώ.
Έλα, Άγγελε.
Καλησπέρα.
Γεια σου. Αυτό που θέλω να σου πω είναι στο Verizon είστε τώρα ασπρόμαυρος με μεγάλα παράσιτα.
Το ξέρω αυτό. We know that. The cable TV, they're going to fix it. Yes. Okay.
Because I just come in the house 10 minutes ago and see you, Jesus Christ.
Okay.
Anyway, the Mr. Israeli said too many things and too nice things, and he's talking very nice. And I have no question for him. I congratulate him because he's speaking the truth. Thank you very much.
All right. Next. Yes. Yes. Next line. Ωραία. Γιώργο, να τον αφήσουμε τον Mr. McGOVERN. Let me get one more line and then we let him go. Go ahead.
Hello.
Yes.
Κύριε Άγγελε.
Yes.
Συγχαρητήρια για τον εκφωνητή Mr. McGOVERN. Congratulations. I have so many years hear the truth and you say just the truth. Okay, I'm not good in English language, but congratulations. We need people like you once a week to learn the right thing. Thank you again, and God bless everybody. God bless America, first of all.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have to interject here that I very much wish that when the president was finished his speeches, he would say, God bless America and God bless the rest of the world too.
Really?
I don't think God shows any special favoritism. And for him to always say, God bless America, well, what about the rest of the world? I think we need to think in larger terms. I would really like to hear him say, God bless the whole world. Let's keep it from more war.
Really. Mr. McGOVERN, I want to thank you very much to be a part of our talk show today on WGRA television. And hopefully in the future we're going to have you again.
Well, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And George,
Mr. McGovern, thank you very much, sir. It was a pleasure. And, we're following the developments in the Eastern Mediterranean. And hopefully sometime in the near future we can have you back on to discuss, whatever happens in Syria and other areas in that region.
Fine. Meanwhile, you can tune into my website, which is raymcgovern.com.
Oh, amazing.
Yes, you can get updated on all your latest information on www.raymcgovern.com.
That's very interesting. You're going to log in. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Good night.
Γιώργο, ξαναπάρε με τηλέφωνο πίσω αν μπορείς. Κυρίες και κύριοι, ήταν πάρα πολύ αυτό το θέμα σήμερα. Πάρα πολύ ενδιαφέρον ο πρώην άνθρωπος της CIA, εν καιρό Reagan. Τον είδαμε στην αρχή της εκπομπής, αλλά οι γραμμές ήταν λιγάκι κάτω. Λόγω ότι είχαμε και δύο φωτογραφίες, το κομπιούτερ δεν μπορούσε να τα κάνει χάο. Να πάμε πίσω στο Γιώργο Γιαλτουριδη με βίντεο τώρα. Γιώργο, ήταν πάρα πολύ ενδιαφέρον ο Raymond McGovern.
Ναι, αυτό που είπε... είχα πάρει, Άγγελε, πριν περίπου μία εβδομάδα, όταν αυτός και η ομάδα του γράψανε μία επιστολή στον πρόεδρο και τον είπανε δύο πράγματα. Το πρώτο πράγμα είναι δεν έχεις καθόλου αποδείξεις ότι την επίθεση, τη χημική επίθεση την έκανε ο Μπασάρ Αλ-Ασάντ ή κυβερνητική ή στρατιωτική της κυβέρνησης. Και μάλιστα τον γράφουν, έχουμε εμείς αποδείξεις ότι 8 μέρες πριν, 13 και 14 Οκτώου, η επίθεση έγινε 21 Οκτώου, 13 και 14 Οκτώου έγινε μια συγκέντρωση σε μια τουρκική βάση όπου συμμετείχαν Τούρκοι, Καταριανοί, Αμερικανοί και Ισλαμοφασίστες και οι τέτοιοι και οι αντάρτες. Και μάλιστα εκεί τους είχαν δώσει πληροφορίες ότι σύντομα θα συμβεί κάτι που θα αλλάξει τη ροή του πολέμου, του εμφυλίου. Αυτό τους είπανε μόνο. Και μάλιστα τους είπανε ετοιμαστείτε. Λοιπόν, και μάλιστα είχαν έρθει ηγέτες των ανταρτών από την Κωνσταντινούπολη σε εκείνη τη σύσκεψη. Αυτές τις πληροφορίες τις έχουμε, λέει αυτή η ομάδα. Και το δεύτερο είναι το λεγόμενο key bono. Key bono είναι λατινική έκφραση για το who benefits, ποιος κερδίζει. Και όπως μας έχει πει ο κύριος McGovern, ο κερδισμένος εδώ σε έναν εμφύλιο πόλεμο που να συνεχίζει είναι το Ισραήλ. Γιατί όσο αυτοί οι δύο αλληλοσφάχτονται, οι Σουνίτες και οι Σιήτες, δεν θα ενοχλήσουν το Ισραήλ. Δεν θα το χτυπήσουν, δεν θα το κάνουν τίποτα. Δηλαδή άσε αυτούς να σφάχνονται ο ένας τον άλλον και εμείς τουλάχιστον από αυτούς είμαστε ήσυχοι. Έτσι, γι' αυτό το Ισραήλ θέλει να συνεχίσει αυτή η υπόθεση. Γι' αυτό θέλουν κάποιοι να αποδυναμώσουν την κυβέρνηση Μπασάρ Αλ-Ασάντ και ταυτοχρόνως δηλαδή δίνεις και όπλο στους αντάρτες και φέρνεις δηλαδή ας πούμε το playing field.
Ναι. Γιώργο, με λίγα λόγια από αυτά που κατάλαβα από τον...
Προηγείς μια ισοσκέληση εκεί.
Από αυτά που κατάλαβα, εντάξει, αυτό τελείωσε με τον πόλεμο. Ο πόλεμος, όπως το είπε και για Τζόξη στην αρχή της εκπομπής, πηγαίναμε λέει για πόλεμο αλλά δεν είχαμε στρατιώτες. Το είπε για Τζόκα αυτό, ξέρεις.
Ναι.
Απότυχε δηλαδή ο πόλεμος, δεν είχαμε στρατιώτες. Δηλαδή πήγαμε κάπου πόλεμο, δεν είχαμε στρατιώτες. Ένα όμως που έπαιξε πάρα πολύ ενδιαφέρον είναι αυτά τα λεγόμενά του σχετικά με τα μέσα μαζικής ενημέρωσης στις ΗΠΑ.
Σπάνια τα ακούς αυτό.
Αυτό από Αμερικανό άνθρωπο της κυβέρνησης και της CIA σπάνια να τα ακούσεις. Τα ακούσαμε σήμερα.
Είναι μια μεγάλη ομάδα και αυτός ανήκει σε μια μεγάλη
ομάδα που δεν μπορεί.
Της CIA.
Ναι, και μετά σου είπε και το εξής. ότι το εβραϊκό λόμπι στην Αμερική είναι πολύ ισχυρό.
Καλά, αυτό το γνωρίζουμε όλοι.
Όλοι το γνωρίζουμε. Και τα μέσα μαζικής ενημέρωσης, όπως μας είπε, παραδείγματος χάρη το New York Times, είναι Εβραίοι που το έχουν. Έτσι δεν είναι?
Όλα τα μεγάλα μέσα μαζικής ενημέρωσης είπε.
Είναι Εβραίοι. Λοιπόν, αλλά τι γίνεται? Όταν κάνουν κάτι και είναι αρνητικό για το Ισραήλ, το βάζουν στη 18 σελίδα με μικρά γραμματάκια, να μην το διαβάζει ο κόσμος. Ενώ στην μπροστινή σελίδα αυτοί έχουν πυρηνικά όπλα. Πάμε στην Αμερική. Δηλαδή, όλη η υπόθεση αυτή τώρα με τον πόλεμο στη Συρία ήταν επιρροή του Ισραήλ. Να βάλει το Ισραήλ την Αμερική να πολεμήσει. Και δυστυχώς για τους Ισραηλίτες και ευτυχώς για μας και για τον ελεύθερο κόσμο και για όλο τον πλανήτη, απότυχε όλη αυτή η υπόθεση. Παρότι δεν που είχαν.
Άγγελε, το ρώτησα όμως σχετικά με τον ρόλο της Τουρκίας, γιατί ο Ερντογάν λύσαξε, δηλαδή, αφρούς από το στόμα έβγαζε ο Ερντογάν.
Και σήμερα, έχει τρελαθεί σήμερα.
Ναι, και το θέμα είναι ότι, όπως κατάλαβα εγώ, δεν ήθελε να ακουμπήσει το θέμα Τουρκίας, το πήγε πάλι πίσω στο Ισραήλ αυτός. Εμένα πιο πολύ με ενδιέφερε γιατί ο Τούρκος λύσαξε για πόλεμο. Ο Τούρκος το μόνο που έκανε ήταν έστειλε ένα RF-4 αεροπλάνο και μέσα σε λίγα λεπτά το κατέρευσαν οι Σύριοι. Μετά ο Τούρκος έβαλε την ουρά στα σκέλη και γαυγίσει. Από τότε γαυγίσει, δεν κάνει τίποτα άλλο παρά να γαυγίσει. Ένα αεροπλάνο έστειλε και το ρίξαν οι Σύριοι.
Ναι.
Λοιπόν, εμένα αυτό με ενδιαφέρει. Ο Τούρκος. Ο Τούρκος γιατί λύσαξε να χτυπήσουν. Καταλαβαίνουμε όλοι μαζί, καταλαβαίνουμε όλοι το συμφέρον του Ισραήλ εδώ. Και να σε πω κάτι από αυτά που είπε σχετικά από τους γερουσιαστές, σχετικά από τα μέσα μαζικής ενημέρωσης, σχετικά από το μόνο κράτος στην περιοχή που έχει μια επιτιθετική πολιτική εναντίον όλα τα άλλα. Από μια πλευρά μπορώ να πω, μπράβο τους, είναι μάγκες. Μπορώ να το πω αυτό.
Για ποιους?
Για τους Εβραίους. Μπράβο τους, είναι μάγκες.
Πετύχανε κάτι
στο σημεία, είναι μέσα σε ένα γκέτο, να είσαι τώρα να μείνεις σε ένα γκέτο, όλοι οι αράπηδες ναρκέμποροι από γύρω σου, εντάξει, να οπλοφορούν και τα λοιπά, και εσύ δηλαδή να μην φοβάσαι κανέναν εκεί μέσα. Βεβαίως όμως και να έχεις ένα ξάδερφο απέναντι πιο κάτω, ας πούμε, στη γειτονιά, που να τον καλείς οποτεδήποτε θέλεις να σε βοηθήσει. Αυτός είναι Αμερικανός βεβαίως.
Για να σας ρωτήσω κάτι, είπε ο Ρέιμοντ McGOVERN σχετικά για το Ισραήλ. Θυμάσαι που πήγε ο Κίσι και τους έδωσε μια πρόταση, έκανε μια πρόταση.
Το 1974, μετά τον πόλεμο του 1973.
Ναι, και αρνήθηκε. Τι είδους πρόταση, να το πούμε στα ελληνικά, ήταν αυτή?
Κοινό αμυντικό δόγμα ήθελε να δημιουργήσει ο Κίσινγκερ μεταξύ Αμερικής και Ισραήλ. Κοινό αμυντικό δόγμα. Το Ισραήλ είπε όχι, γιατί θα με ελέγχεις μετά. Όταν θέλω εγώ να χτυπήσω το Λίβανο απάνω τη Χεσμολά, ας πούμε, πρέπει να ζητήσω.
Δηλαδή από τη μία πλευρά θέλουν να λένε ότι είναι κράτος της Αμερικής και έχει την Αμερική πισινό, και από την άλλη να κάνει όποτε θέλει αυτός τους πολέμους.
Βρε, ούτε σύμμαχο τους αποκαλεί ο κ. McGOVERN.
Ναι.
Είπε τη λέξη άλλα, δεν είναι άλλα, λέει, ούτε σύμμαχοι.
Δεν είναι σύμμαχοι καθόλου, τίποτα.
Αλλά κοίτα, το πήμα.
Αλλά πληρώνουμε εμείς, άρα και θα πρέπει. Κοίταξε, θα πρέπει όμως, Γιώργο, γιατί είδες του είπα εγώ. Καλά, ο αμερικανικός λαός κοιμάται, διότι αν κοίταξε τις τελευταίες εκλογές, και τα δύο κόμματα, και οι Ρεπουμπλικανοί και οι Δημοκρατικοί, και οι δύο, και ο Ομπάμα και ο υποψήφιος, ξέχασα και το όνομά του, ο Ρόμνι, τι λέγανε και οι δύο? Δεν ασχοληθήκανε για τα άστρα, δεν ασχοληθήκανε το φεγγάρι, για τους πεινασμένους, για την οικονομία της Αμερικής. Μας μιλάγανε και οι δύο για το Ισραήλ.
Ναι, όταν είχαν το debate για την
δηλαδή τόσο ισχυρό είναι το πολιτικό. Και δεν λέγανε την Ελλάδα, που η Ελλάδα έχει τέτοια προβλήματα με το Ισραήλ, όπως με τους Άραβες.
Γιατί να μην είμαστε εμείς τόσο μάγκες που να τους βάζουμε να λένε για την Ελλάδα? Γιατί δεν καθόμαστε εμείς τώρα να κατηγορούμε τους μάγκες στο Ισραήλ, οι οποίοι κατάφεραν να κάνουν αυτά που κατάφεραν εδώ στην Αμερική, να βάζουν τον πρόεδρο των ΗΠΑ να τους λύσει, να μην πω τίποτα άλλο.
Στην τσέπη τους.
Γιατί να μην μπορούμε και εμείς να το κάνουμε αυτό το πράγμα?
Στην τσέπη τους. Μα το έχεις καταλάβει αυτό?
Να μην μπορούμε και εμείς.
Και ήδη σου είπε ότι αυτοί, λέει, ανεβάζω κατεβάζω τους πρόεδρους.
Ναι. Γιατί να μην μπορούμε και εμείς?
Δηλαδή τώρα, εάν βρεθεί ένας πρόεδρος ο οποίος πάει εναντίον του εβραϊκού λόμπι, τι θα γίνει?
Πρόεδρος να πάει, δηλαδή θα πρέπει πρώτα απ' όλα να πει ψέματα στην προεκλογική του εκστρατεία, γιατί οποιοσδήποτε υποψήφιος θέλει να γίνει πρόεδρος πρέπει να πει τα καλύτερα λόγια για το Ισραήλ.
Αν δεν τα πει,
δεν γίνεται πρόεδρος. Θα τον φάνε, θα τον ρημάξουν. πρέπει να γίνει πρόεδρος με μία, ας πούμε, καμπάνια τέτοια και μετά να αλλάξει 180 μοίρες. Και άμα γίνει κάτι τέτοιο, δηλαδή μπορούν να πάνε, δηλαδή, ας πούμε, στο σημείο που να το κάνουν και impeach αυτοί εδώ πέρα. Δηλαδή 2 χρόνια αργότερα να χάσει τη θέση του.
Δηλαδή φτάνουν στο σημείο,
είναι ικανοί
δηλαδή.
να το κάνουν αυτοί, είναι ικανοί.
Ναι, και όμως...
Σήκω πάνω, κάτσε κάτω τον
Και
λέμε.
όμως, χτες γιορτάσαμε την 11η Σεπτεμβρίου. Εξαιτίας των Εβραίων πέσανε οι δημιουργοί. Εξαιτίας των Εβραίων πληρώνουμε τις νύφες. Εξαιτίας των Εβραίων οι αραβικές χώρες είναι αντί της Αμερικής. Κάτσε ρε εσύ.
Άμεσα, αλλά έπαιξαν κάποιο ρόλο και αυτή, δηλαδή η υποστήριξη της Αμερικής προς το Ισραήλ έπαιξε κάποιο ρόλο, αλλά πάλι εδώ πρέπει να μην ξεχάσουμε και το ρόλο της Τουρκίας, Άγγελε.
Ναι.
Εντάξει, η Τουρκία πάλι λύσαξε να γίνει αυτό που δεν έγινε. Τώρα οι Τούρκοι γυρεύουν τρόπο να ξαναγίνει, δηλαδή να πραγματοποιηθεί μια επίθεση στη Συρία. Δεν μπορώ να πω ότι τα συμφέροντα του Ερντογάν συμβαδίζουν με τα συμφέροντα του Νετανιάχου.
Όχι.
Έχει άλλα συμφέροντα ο Ερντογάν, έχει άλλα συμφέροντα το Ισραήλ. Ποια είναι τα συμφέροντα της Τουρκίας εδώ και πώς μπορούμε να βρούμε έναν τρόπο που αυτά τα δύο συμφέροντα να έρθουν ένα εναντίον των άλλων. Δηλαδή αυτό θέλουμε να κάνουμε εμείς. Δηλαδή να βάλουμε τον Εβραίο εναντίον των Τούρκων. Τα κατάφερε ο Ερντογάν, μόνος του το έκανε αυτό και στον Νταβός και με το Μαύρη Μάρμαρα. Τον έπιασε ο Ομπάμα από το αυτί, τον είπε τον Εβραίο πάρε τηλέφωνο τώρα τον Ερντογάν και ζήτα τον συγγνώμη, το οποίο το έκανε ο Νετανιάχου, μεγάλη τρόπη για τους Εβραίους είναι αυτό.
Μεγάλο ξεφτυλισμό.
Οι περισσότερες εφημερίδες στο Ισραήλ τον βρίζαν τον Νετανιάχου για αυτό που έκανε. Ντροπή σου τον έλεγε. Ποιο, τον Τούρκο? Ντροπή σου. Και μάλιστα λέμε και εμείς ντροπή του. Ντροπή του. Θα σε πιάσει ο Αμερικανός από το αυτί να ζητήσει συγγνώμη από τον Τούρκο? Γιατί υπερασπίστηκε στα συμφέροντά σου, θα ζητήσει συγγνώμη από τον Τούρκο? Ντροπή σου.
Λοιπόν, για να πάμε στα τηλέφωνα τώρα να ακούσω και τους ακροατές. Λέγεται παρακαλώ. Ναι, λέγεται. Λέγεται παρακαλώ, σας ακούμε. Ναι, λέγεται. 727-725-55-55 τα τηλέφωνά μας για τους φίλους και φίλες. Λέγεται παρακαλώ.
Είμαστε ο κύριος McGOVERN αρκετή ώρα.
Έλα.
Εμπρός.
Το ενδιαφέρον των Εβραίων για να υποτιμήσουν, να χάσουν Σύριοι είναι το ζήτημα του Γκολάν. Αυτό είναι για χρόνια. Οι δε Σύριοι το έχουν ζητήσει αυτό και επισήμως στα Ηνωμένα Έθνη για πολλές φορές και πάντοτε τους περίμενε όχι ναι μέσου. Αλλά οι Σύριοι το ζητάνε πάντοτε. Γι' αυτή είναι η διαφορά τους η μόνη μεταξύ Συρίων και Εβραίων, το οποίο οι Εβραίοι το πήρανε από τους Συρίους που είχαν την άλλη τόσο καιρό πριν 10-15 χρόνια πόλεμο.
Το 67 νομίζω πήρανε τα υψώματα Γκολάν, αν δεν κάνω λάθος, ο πόλεμος Γιον Κιπούρ, αν δεν κάνω λάθος. Όπως ξέρει να μας ενημερώσει, νομίζω.
Και το πήρανε με τους Συρίους που είχαν πόλεμο εδώ και 15-20 χρόνια, κάπου τόσο, 12 δεν θυμάμαι, δεν ξέρω κάπου, αλλά αυτή είναι η ιστορία.
Μάλιστα.
Έχουν γίνει μεγάλες ενέργειες από τους Συρίους για να τα πάρουν πίσω. Και όλο σου, ναι σου, ξέρω εγώ, αλλά είναι οι Εβραίοι είναι κατακτητές πάνω στη Συρία. Το είναι αλήθεια.
Σχετικά με τα υψώματα Γκολάν.
Για τον Γκολάν και μόνο.
Ωραία λοιπόν, καλό βράδυ.
Okay,
το άλλο που μας είπε ο McGOVERN για το Ιράν και για αυτά τα οποία μυστικές υπηρεσίες CIA της Αμερικής, από την Ευρώπη, από την Αγγλία, από την Κύπρο, ξέρεις, που έχουν για τη βάση εκεί της Κύπρου είναι μυστικές υπηρεσίες, ξέρεις.
Για το μεγάλο το ραντάρ που
και λένε ότι στο Ιράν σταμάτησε να κάνει την ατομική βόμβα κτλ. Το 2005-2002.
Το 3.
Το 2003.
Η έκθεση βγήκε το 7 ή το 8.
Ναι, και συνεχίζει όμως το Ισραήλ, όχι λέει, κάνουν μπόπους για να επηρεάζει το λόμπι εδώ πέρα στην Αμερική και να βάλει την Αμερική σε πόλεμο.
Ναι.
Να χτυπήσει εκεί.
Ναι, αλλά ο Εβραίος όμως πέρσι ή πρόπερσι ήθελε να χτυπήσει μόνος του, το σταμάτησε ο Αμερικανός, γιατί η αλήθεια να λέγεται. Τον είπε ο Αμερικανός, εσύ θα τα αρχίσεις, αλλά εγώ πρέπει να το τελειώσω.
Ναι.
Αυτό είπε ο Αμερικανός, εσύ θα τα αρχίσεις, αλλά δεν μπορεί να το τελειώσεις, εγώ πρέπει να το τελειώσω.
Γιατί δεν θα μπορεί να το τελειώσει, θα σας εξαφανίσουν από το Ισραήλ, anyway.
Ναι, ακόμα και η υπόθεση της Συρίας βγήκανε κάποια ρεπορτάζ τα οποία λέγανε ότι το Ιράν απείλησε ότι θα στείλει χιλιάδες πυράβλους στο Ισραήλ. Δεν ξέρω αν αληθεύει αυτό, πολλοί δικοί μας το μετέδωσαν αυτό και κάποιοι και εδώ πέρα πάλι το μετέδωσαν, αλλά δεν ξέρω αν όντως το είπε αυτό το Ιράν.
Η υπόθεση, ξέρεις ποια είναι, ότι θα πρέπει ο αμερικανικός λαός, γι' αυτό και πάρα πολλά talk shows και τα αγοράζουν οι Εβραίοι, θα πρέπει ο αμερικανικός λαός να καταλάβει ότι η Αμερική δεν θα πρέπει να είναι τόσο κλειστά με το Ισραήλ.
Κοίτα, δεν θα το πήγαινα εγώ τώρα εκεί τώρα.
Δηλαδή όπως είναι, θα είσαι εξίσου, γιατί να πληρώνουμε εμείς, όχι κάτσε ρε Γιώργο, γιατί εμείς οι Αμερικανοί πολίτες να μην έχουν να φάνε, να μην μπορεί, ένα λεπτό, να μην έχουν να φάνε, ο αμερικανικός λαός να μην έχει βγάλα στο παιδί του να δώσει και η κυβέρνηση να πάει να δίνει δωρεάν λεφτά τόσα εκατομμύρια στο Ισραήλ. Γιατί?
Άγγελε, αυτό είναι σταδιακό.
Δεν έχει σημασία το χρόνο.
Το πρώτο βήμα είναι η υπόθεση Συρίας. Ο Αμερικανός λαός δεν σύμπησε. Βγήκε ο Κέρι, είπε τι δεν είπε, μας εξήγησε τώρα.
Ξεφτυλίζει και ο
κ. McGOVERN τι ήτανε? Ήτανε government assessment, όχι intelligence assessment. Δηλαδή το οποίο έλεγε αυτό το government assessment ήτανε unconfirmed. Δηλαδή χωρίς confirmation, δηλαδή επιβεβαίωση δεν είχε αυτό το government assessment. Και ήταν δηλαδή κάτι το οποίο έραψαν η κυβέρνηση Ομπάμα στα μέτρα τους.
Μάλιστα.
Λοιπόν, δεν ήταν intelligent, δεν ήρθε από τη Συρία. Και ποτέ θα υπέγραφε δύο πράγματα.
Και αποτύχανε. Και
απέτυχε. Και εκεί δεν σύμπησε ο αμερικανικός λαός.
Και ξεφτυλιστήκαν.
Πρώτο βήμα είναι μπράβο στον αμερικανικό λαό που δεν σύμπησε. Έμεινε ενάντια στον πόλεμο εναντίον της Συρίας ο αμερικανικός λαός. Το δεύτερο βήμα είναι να ξυπνήσει ο αμερικανικός λαός σχετικά με την αμερικανική εξωτερική πολιτική. Υπάρχουν πολλά θέματα στην αμερικανική εξωτερική πολιτική. Δεν είναι μόνο η υποστήριξη της Αμερικής προς το Ισραήλ. Είναι και η υποστήριξη της Αμερικής προς την Τουρκία. Εμένα πιο πολύ αυτό με ενδιαφέρει.
Ναι.
Παρά η υποστήριξη Αμερικής. Τι με ενδιαφέρει εμένα τα 3 δις που δίνει ο Αμερικανός στο Ισραήλ.
Όχι βέβαια σε εμάς με ενδιαφέρει για όλους.
1,2-3 έλλειμμα έχει ο Αμερικανός ετησίως.
Γιώργο, δεν παίρνει ο χρόνος. Θα πρέπει να κλείσω την εκπομπή για σήμερα. Λοιπόν, να έχεις καλό βράδυ. Ήταν πολύ ενδιαφέρον η εκπομπή. Θα τα ξαναπούμε μια εβδομάδα κάποια στιγμή. Γεια σου. Κυρίες και κύριοι, ήταν η εκπομπή Ελεύθερη Γνώμη με τον Άγγελο Αγγελάτο. Είχαμε σήμερα στην εκπομπή μας τον πρώην πράκτορ της CIA, τον κύριο Raymond McGOVERN. Μπορείτε να πάτε στη σελίδα του να διαβάσετε, έχει πάρα πολλά γραφόμενα εκεί και ενδιαφέρον, raymondmcgovern.com. Θα τον έχουμε πάλι κάποια στιγμή εδώ στην εκπομπή Ελεύθερη Γνώμη, μετά από μερικές εβδομάδες, για να ακούσουμε και να μας πει και άλλα πράγματα, γιατί ο άνθρωπος είναι, όπως φαίνεται, πολύ μελετημένος, οραματισμένος και κατέχει πάρα πολλά πράγματα, κάτι το οποίο εσείς δεν ξέρετε. Σας ευχαριστούμε που μας παρακολουθήσατε. Ραντεβού και πάλι αύριο εδώ στην εκπομπή Ελεύθερη Γνώμη με τον Άγγελο Αγγελάτο. Να περνάτε καλά, αγαπητοί φίλοι, όπου και να είστε. Η εκπομπή αυτή θα είναι και στο YouTube σε 2-3 ώρες από τώρα. Γεια σας. Ήταν η εκπομπή Ελεύθερη Γνώμη. Ελεύθερη Γνώμη με τον Άγγελο Αγγελάτο.